Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. So much happened yesterday in the news, from riots to Trump calling people childish to fights at the food pantry. So, if you got a little bit of time, let's sit here and let's talk about that and let's make it make sense. So, today in politics, essentially, Trump introduced a final rule to roll back the Obama fuel era standards, which mandated essentially that gas companies would put certain things in their fuel to make fuel last longer using fossil fuels, things like that, to kind of start to cut back on the oil industry. So that is due to have a court date here coming up. Once we research the bill a little bit further, we'll talk about that some more and we'll see what that's actually about. Further on, is dealing with the crisis that's going on and the virus that's going on. Prisons around the country, prisoners are starting to riot daily. So far, there have only been two deaths in certain prisons, but prisoners, especially in the ISIS camps, HIV patients, things like that, are demanding to be released, because those people with asthma, even certain conditions, they are essentially treating them as if they're patient zero inside of the prison, which is causing prisoner on prisoner violence. No legislation or Congress has been introduced into that. So if you know someone that is behind bars, you might want to reach out and check on them to make sure that everything's okay. Moving further, the U.S. is hitting a new record gram. And when I say that, that means that the U.S. is essentially headed for a slippery slope towards depression, in my personal opinion. But not even necessarily depression. It could be a recession or even worse, a depression. But with unemployment continuing to skyrocket, we are almost at 3.5 million people who have officially filed unemployment, and people are still continuing to file unemployment. But you can't, because the unemployment system keeps crashing. Hospitals are at maximum capacity, Michigan being the worst state of them all, not really necessarily knowing the funding for the medical system in Michigan. But a lot of those areas outside of Detroit, some hospitals, majority of those hospitals in the rural areas have been shut down. Which only leave the major hospitals with the major money to do these things, which is putting hospitals at capacity, because as more and more tests become available, and as testing becomes an actual option, more and more cases are going to be discovered, which is where we're coming into this issue. So doctors are feeling hopeless, as if they're living day by day, says one doctor. He's coming into work not knowing if he's going to have gloves or the proper equipment to actually wear, which is a major issue, especially when you're working in that field. Meanwhile, Trump is remaining optimistic, saying that he did everything in his power to get things and equipment out of the national stockpile, saying that the stockpile had nothing in it. The national stockpile is a emergency store, essentially, excuse me, for the government. And this particular stockpile or store has things from supplies, tissue, ventilators, medical supplies. So anything that you would think of that the government would want if an end of world situation were to happen to quickly rebuild society, to at least get the government going, is in that stockpile. So when we get to those medical supplies and things like that, Trump said to one reporter, called him a wise guy. Because he's continuing to remain optimistic. Meanwhile, doctors are painting a different light on the situation, saying that they barely have supplies. No, I'm not sick. No, I do not have any symptoms. I just smoke and I need to stop smoking. Awful, awful. But moving further, call your senator, call your congressman, and have them break that down to you. Trump is a businessman, so of course, during times of tragedy, he's going to remain optimistic. But at the same time, he needs to start fact checking before he starts to actually speak, and actually making sure what he's saying, or at least correct his verbiage, so nobody gets like the wrong impression or the wrong intention behind what he's saying. New York State has turned parts of Central Park and the harbor into essentially makeshift graveyards. A total of 960 deaths so far within that state. 960 bodies, not necessarily 960 bodies. I couldn't find an exact number of how many bodies were in these graveyards. But this was first enacted in 1987 during the HIV epidemic that hit New York City pretty rough. So they had to take the parks and they had to take certain areas and turn them into graveyards, which is where a majority of the graveyards come from to this day, especially those that are close to the city. That is actually New York City itself, or one of the 5 boroughs. That's where it's spurred from. So now they're having to once again do that until they can figure out what to do with these bodies. And so other states are starting to take on similar ideas as cases continue to rise. But however, on a positive note, 150 people have recovered from this. So it is something that can be beat. It just, if you have one of those underlying illnesses, it just makes it all of the worse. So you just want to continue to wash your hands, wash your hands. If you have any masks, wear your masks. You should be donating them to hospitals. But if you have any of that PPE equipment, just do what's best for you to keep yourself and your family safe. Moving outside of United States, here's what's going on in other countries. 23-person riot in Colombia over outbreak. The riot started outside of a store. People, as Honduras and Colombia and other third world countries and things like that began to shut down, stores and things like that are starting to close early. But the issue with that is that many people stay outside of the actual city and villages and areas. So when stores start to close, the government has a stronger hand in these particular countries. So riots are outbreaking because people are trying to get food and people are hungry. And because of this virus, there are certain lockdowns and restrictions that are in place. Not to bring it back over to the United States, but a pastor was even arrested. He was holding more than 500 people. He was holding church service. It had more than 500 people in his audience. Quite interesting, but nevertheless, that's pretty crazy. But more outbreaks are happening now. Outbreaks have spread to Colombia. Moving south of the border into Mexico. Mexico has reported several burglaries, several robberies, several riots of different retail establishments because as the city was empty and when the city closed, what does that do for the homeless population in many of these major cities? That gives you the opportunity to steal. That gives you the opportunity to riot. That gives you the opportunity to do these things. Bringing it back over to the U.S., New York City, one of the biggest cities in the country, had a call-off rate of 11% for the past 2 weeks. Out of 100%, their staff, 92%, I believe, was the actual on staff at the time. 11% out of that 92 called off work because of this virus. So people were sick. And then that just takes it even worse. Funny news, crazy news, and this is where I'm going to end it for the day, because nothing really happened in drugs. Nothing was really said about the Donald Trump fuel era, just he was creating a bill. But moving outside of that, there's a condom shortage, which studies have shown that people are actually not social distancing. Remember a couple days ago when we had the conversation of the cell phone data? Turns out that analytics has proven that meeting dates, if you're using your location, they know who you're actually hooking up with. So with that information, they can match you because they're not going to show you a million people. They're going to show you people that they know that you'll be interested in. So using analytics, they said that this person was with this person for this amount of time. Which brought the question of, hey, there's a condom shortage. So which leads the question to, is the lifestyle company an essential employer? That's the good question. That's the big question of the day. But at the end of the day, call your senator, call your congressman, because all workers, if you are essential and you are working during this time, you are putting your life at risk, and we really appreciate every single thing that you do, or at least I do. So by calling your senator, calling your congressman, some companies are offering sick pay, and then some companies are actually walking off the job because they're not getting sick pay. Yeah, you give me an extra $2, but what if I get sick and I'm not here to earn this extra $2? What will I do then? No sick pay, no FMLA. What's going to cover me then? So until next time, guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. Find me on every single podcast station that's out there. So that goes from Anchor, that goes from Apple, that goes from Google, that goes from Voxer. There's so many different out there. Find me somewhere and listen to me. Give me feedback, give me comments. Much appreciated. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.